Welcome in, Browns General Manager Andrew Berry. Andrew, thanks for joining us tonight.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Ken.
All right, Mason Graham, number 5 overall. Tell us what went into the pick.
Yeah, so, Mason, we really feel like he's a great fit for what we want to do defensively. Interior pressure is hard to find. It's hard to come by, but it's extremely impactful. I think, if you look at, the free agent market, those guys are getting $30+ million now.
Yeah.
And, Mason, to be able to affect the pocket from the inside, in our attack front, with the edge rush that we already have and some of the guys we already have in the room, we felt like it was a fantastic opportunity for us.
Browns General Manager Andrew Berry joining us here on the Draft Show with Tyvis Powell and Nathan Zagura.
AB, let's go back to the trade that set this up, the pick of Mason Graham. When I saw it, honestly, I kind of was like, wasn't sure I was reading it correctly. Would one thing to get a future first to move back 3 spots would be great, but to add pick number 36 in this draft, when a lot of people said that's kind of the sweet spot in this draft, how pleased were you with that?
Yeah, we felt like it was a really good use of the original pick to trade into what we thought would be the heart of the draft and to get a future first-round pick, which we think, aside from acquiring a quarterback, is probably the hardest thing to do in the sport. We think it sets us up really nicely over the next 2 drafts, to really make an impact on the roster.
AB, we've seen that you guys accumulated another second-round pick. A lot of people think that you might package that up and move back into the first round. Is that something that's on your mind?
I'd say, never say never. I mean, part of it is, we're monitoring how the board's currently falling. It's typically not in our MO to move up, but we did do it for JOK a couple years ago. So I would never rule anything out, but each situation is probably is unique.
You bring in Mason Graham, and you mentioned with edge pressure, it's great to have somebody that can collapse the pocket. I'm sure you're imagining him and Mike Hall next to each other for a very long time, and that's got to be pretty enticing. Where you look at kind of the way this board may fall, 33, 36, there could be a bevy of skill position talent there to address the offensive side of the ball. Was getting that 36 pick, knowing that, was that a big factor in obviously sealing the deal in addition to the future first?
Yeah, I'd say everything was a factor in it. Certainly having another pick in the top 40, that's a huge advantage. We'll know here, I guess, in the next, Arizona's on the clock, so we'll call it the next 15-ish picks, what we're staring at going into Friday. And one thing we do know, we don't know the positions, but we know we're going to be staring at some good players.
Is there something to the value of 33? It's been traded 3 years in a row, but twice to go up, so it's gotten out of Friday and once waited. Will Levis, they came up with the Titans kid for him. When you have that, it becomes a little more valuable than just pick 33 because it's the first pick and everybody wants it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Nathan. It's not just the player you could select, but quite honestly, ever since the draft went to a 3-day format, you just get more optionality with that pick that starts Friday night. And so whether we trade up, trade back, select a player, we'll see, but we feel like that's a valuable pick to have as well.
Walk me through what goes through the process. It's obviously when you get to 5, there's a bunch of players that, other guys want. Scouts say, this is the guy. How do you determine, all right, Mason Graham is the guy that we're going to choose out of all of those guys?
So, one, we make those decisions ahead of time. When you're picking this high, it's a short list of players that should go in that spot. So, we had probably 7 guys that we identified that we thought were excellent prospects that we'd have some level of interest in at that price point, so to speak. And then when they went out, and we just really ordered them. So when they went off the board, and Mason was our highest guy relative to that group, and we were really excited to get him.
I don't know if you remember, I asked you on Monday about is there a number of blue chip guys, and you just said 7. I'm guessing, interpreting that if you trade, you want to stay in that group, and to be able to do that and pick up the assets you did, that's got to make you very happy.
Yeah, I may back up. I wouldn't say that we necessarily thought there were just 7 blue chip guys. We would have been happy trading at any point, anywhere on the board, as long as the compensation was
for
right.
sure.
That's probably the big thing. We felt like this deal was especially attractive because it allowed us to stay within the top 5 while adding a high 2 in a future first-round pick.
Andrew Berry joining us, Browns general manager here on the show. What was it about maybe Mason's personality that stuck out to you and the staff?
Yeah, so I'd say it's actually more his competitive personality because really, in person, Mason is actually, for a guy who's a tough physical defensive tackle, he's actually a little bit unassuming. He's a little bit on the quieter side, but when he crosses the white lines, you can't help but notice him. He plays with an incredibly high motor. He's incredibly tough. He's incredibly competitive. and physical. And when you add that, kind of on-field persona with the physical talent, his athleticism, his quickness, his strength, he has the potential to be a game wrecker in this league.
For people who, I know a lot of people in this area probably watched him maybe play Ohio State. So they saw that game. He obviously played very well in that game. But who just pull up the numbers, because you're talking about interior pressure, and say, he's owed 3.5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, never double digit. But you're talking about the penetration and the pressure. What's kind of, not for a box score scout, what's the tape tell you about his ability at this level maybe to be more productive in those areas?
Yeah, I think there are two things. I think number one, and we talk about this all the time with Miles, where people are like, okay, hey, he didn't get a sack, he had a bad game. When that's really not really the best way to look at defensive linemen. The second thing with Mason specifically, it's actually pretty incredible the production he was able to have given what they asked their defensive linemen to do. They're very much more of a read and react system. Play the run before you rush. We're the exact opposite. We're get up the field, disrupt, penetrate, really play the run on your way to the quarterback, and he's going to fit perfectly in that.
When you have a Myles Garrett and you're studying an interior guy, how maybe he's double teamed a lot on tape. I didn't watch a ton, to be perfectly honest, of his tape, but do you pay more attention to his one-on-one situations, knowing that, hey, at this level, he's going to be singled up a heck of a lot more than he probably was in college?
Yeah, we would do that for any rusher, edge, interior, regardless of who they are, because you really, if you're taking a defense lineman that you think will be a good rusher, you want one of two things: either the guy that commands the slide or the protection, which Mason did in college and Myles does for us currently, or you want the guy that if someone else is commanding the slide, they can win the one-on-one matchups consistently enough.
Coach, or Andrew, I was about to call you Coach. AB,
he's the coach of the person.
That's true. How much do y'all pay attention to what other teams in the division doing, like Cincinnati, Pittsburgh? How much do y'all pay attention, and how much does that change what y'all want to do in the draft?
It doesn't really impact us. Like we build our team to what we think will allow us to build a team that can compete year in and year out for championships. Look, we would rather places follow us than we follow other teams. And so we'd like to zig when other people zag. We'd like to zag when other people zig. And that doesn't really play a major role into how we build the team.
So, this revamp of the of running games in the NFL, especially because quarterbacks are coming out and the offenses are so much different than what we've seen in previous years, that doesn't play a part into maybe the importance of Mason Graham?
No, I'd say this. That didn't necessarily go into this particular pick. And honestly, if it was a player that we didn't think could rush, there's no way we would have used the pick on him. We don't really bring in guys, or we don't really look to acquire guys who are just first and second down players, particularly guys that you're going to use a high resource on. They have to be able to impact the passing game, and they have to be able to impact third down. And that's particularly important in our scheme with how we use our defensive linemen, and particularly our defensive tackles. So that's a huge component of it.
So you can envision, obviously, Malik, who's been a professional pass rusher, Mike Hall, and Mason having that rotation, staying fresh, but these are guys who are going to play on third down. So we have the opportunity to have two defensive tackles out there on third down more than perhaps in the past.
Correct.
Okay, so it's good. Talk about just kind of your philosophy and from when you came in 2020, this time around, with the defensive tackle position, because it seems like it has shifted. You've now used a first-round pick and a second-round pick. Now both those guys pass rushers, but initially it was kind of, let's just get anybody in here, and that wasn't necessarily as much of a priority position as it appears to be now.
I think it just depends on the scheme.
Fair.
With Joe, there was a little bit more emphasis on the edge guys. With Jim, there's a little bit more emphasis on the on the interior guys. So that's a little bit more the shift. We'll always even. Earlier in my tenure, if we were going to use a high resource on an interior player, he would have had to rush
Has
the
to be a pass rusher.
Has to be a pass rusher.
Andrew, thank you very much for the time. Good luck the rest of the weekend.
All right, thanks, guys.
Browns General Manager Andrew Berry joining us in studio as we go through the 2025 NFL Draft.